The smell hit her first. Rust, sweat, and something sour that no human nose was built to handle. Arya pulled the cloth higher over her face and kept walking down the long auction row. Cages stretched on both sides of her, stacked three high. Inside them, alien creatures hissed, cried, or stared at the floor like they had given up on the universe a long time ago. She had not come here to shop. She had come to find the ones nobody wanted: the injured, the dying, the broken. Her tiny rescue clinic back on the sanctuary moon was already full, but she could not stop looking. The trading moon of Helver Nine was a cruel place. Every species in the outer arm came here to sell, buy, or throw away living things. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared who cried. Arya reached the end of the hall where the largest cages stood. Most were empty. The auction was almost over. Then she saw the last platform. It was huge, and on it, chained down by thick iron collars that glowed faint blue, was a dragon. She stopped breathing for a second. He was old, older than anything she had ever seen. His scales, which must have once been bright gold, had faded to a dull bronze. Cracks ran across them like dry riverbeds. His left wing was bent the wrong way. A long scar cut across his face. His eyes were half closed, cloudy, tired. But what froze her was how still he was. He just lay there. Not because he was beaten, because he had stopped expecting kindness a very long time ago. A four-armed merchant stepped onto the platform. Last item of the night, he barked, his voice bored. Subject 7, Old Dragon. Useless for labor, useless for racing, useless for breeding. Bones still worth something if you grind them right. Starting bid, 20 credits. A few cruel laughs rolled through the small crowd. One buyer, a tall reptile in armor, shouted, "I'll take the skull for my wall." 25. Another voice called, 30. The teeth alone are worth that. Arya felt her hands shake. Not from fear, from anger. She looked at the old dragon again, and this time his eyes opened. Just a little, just enough to look right at her. Something passed between them. She could not name it. It was the simple feeling of one tired soul seeing another and quietly asking, "Are you here to hurt me too?" Her throat tightened. 50, said the reptile buyer, laughing. Final offer. The merchant raised his hammer. Going once? Arya did not remember walking forward. She just remembered her own voice, louder than she expected. "Everything I have." The whole hall went quiet. The merchant turned slowly. "Excuse me, human. Every credit in my account," she said. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. "I will transfer all of it, right now, for him." The reptile buyer laughed. "She is bidding her whole life for a corpse with wings." But the merchant's eyes lit up. He pulled out a scanner and pointed it at Arya's wristband. Her balance flashed on his screen. He whistled. "Sold," he said. "To the human. May she choke on her kindness." The hall booed. A few buyers spat on the floor as they left. The reptile shoved past her and hissed, "You wasted a life on a dead king, girl." She did not understand what he meant. Not yet. The merchant unlocked the iron collars. "He's yours. Get him out before closing." Arya climbed onto the platform slowly. Up close, the dragon was even bigger than she thought. His chest rose and fell in slow, painful breaths. She knelt by his head. She did not touch him yet. She just spoke softly. "Hello," she said. "My name is Arya. I am not here to hurt you. I am here to take you home." The dragon's cloudy eyes moved. He looked at her hand, then at her face, then at her hand again. She slowly reached out and placed her small palm on the bridge of his snout. His scales were warm. She had expected them to be cold. He let out a long, low breath. Not a growl, not a roar, just a sigh. The kind a person makes when they finally sit down after standing for 100 years. "Can you walk?" she whispered. He blinked once, slowly. She decided to take that as a yes. It took almost an hour to get him off the platform and into the loading bay of her small cargo ship, the Lantern. He limped on three legs. His broken wing dragged behind him. Twice he stopped and almost fell. Each time, Arya stood under his shoulder, both her arms pressed against his side, whispering, "One more step. Just one more." He listened to her. A creature 10 times her size, and he listened to a stranger's voice because it was the first gentle one he had heard in longer than he could count. As Arya was finally closing the cargo door, a small wrinkled figure shuffled up to her from the shadows of the alley. An old elder leaning on a cane. His many eyes were wet. He grabbed her sleeve with a shaking hand. "Foolish girl," he whispered. "Do you know what you have just bought?" Arya opened her mouth to answer, but the old elder was already walking away, muttering into the dark. The crown. The crown still breathes. Rain was falling on the windshield of the lantern when Arya finally cleared the upper atmosphere. Not real rain, just tiny ice particles knocked loose from a passing comet trail, but it sounded like rain, soft and steady against the cockpit glass, and that was enough. She let the sound fill the silence for a long moment before she finally let her shoulders drop. She had done it. He was safe. They were out. She turned the ship onto a slow path through the Orion trade lanes, set the autopilot to a quiet sanctuary moon called Velmara, and only then did she allow herself to breathe. Then she went down to the cargo bay. He was still where she had left him, curled on the soft padding she had pulled from her sleeping cot. His head was resting on his front legs. His chest was rising and falling slow and even. He was asleep, or pretending to be. Arya sat down on a crate a few steps away, careful not to make noise. In the soft yellow lights of the cargo bay, his bronze scales looked almost gold again. She had work to do. For the next 2 days, Arya barely slept. She heated water and washed the dried blood off his scales with soft cloths. She used her medkit to clean the deep cut over his eye. She made warm broth from her food supplies, poured it into a wide metal pan, and slid it close to his snout. She did not force him to drink. She just left it there. The next time she looked, the pan was empty. She removed the iron collars one by one. Most owners never bothered. The collars were heavy, painful, and built to stay on forever. It took Arya almost 6 hours with a plasma cutter and her gentlest hands. When the last collar fell to the floor with a heavy clang, the old dragon let out a sound she could not describe. It was somewhere between a sigh and a sob. She did not say anything. She just laid her hand on his neck and stayed there until he stopped trembling. She named him on the third night. You need a name, she told him, sitting cross legged near his head. She had a cup of warm chai in her hands, made from the last packet her grandmother had sent her before she left Earth. I cannot keep calling you Subject 7. That is a label someone put on a cage. He opened one eye, watching. My grandmother used to tell me stories, Arya said softly, about people who lived through terrible things and kept walking anyway. She had a word for them in her old language. Taran, it means the one who endures. She smiled a small smile. You endured. So I am going to call you Tarn, if that is all right. The dragon's eyes stayed open for a long moment. Then he closed it again, slowly, like a yes. She talked to him every day after that. About Earth, about the green hills she had grown up on, about the smell of rain on dry soil, about how her grandmother used to make chai on a small stove and sing while she stirred it. She told him that humans were a young species in the galaxy, that most other species laughed at how small they were, how short they lived, how loud they were. But humans had one thing they could not give up. We cannot walk past someone who is hurting, she said one night, leaning against his warm side. It is just how we are built. We see pain and our feet stop moving. Stupid, maybe. But it is the only thing about us I am proud of. Tan did not answer. He never did. But that night, when she fell asleep on the floor of the cargo bay with her blanket pulled up to her chin, something soft and heavy settled over her in the dark. She woke up just enough to realize what it was. His wing, the good one, carefully laid over her like a shield. In her half sleep, she smiled and whispered, Thank you, Tarn. She felt the deep, slow rumble of his breath underneath her, and she fell asleep again. What she did not know was that in the dark, the old dragon was awake, and he was remembering things. He remembered a throne carved from black stone. He remembered the weight of a crown that was not made of metal, but made of light. He remembered 12 galaxies bowing as he passed overhead. He remembered a council of his closest kin smiling at him across a long table, lifting their goblets in a toast, and the slow burning poison they had hidden in his cup. He remembered being dragged in chains for the first time. The shock of it, the shame. He remembered forgetting his own name somewhere around the 400th year of slavery. And now, in the soft yellow light of a small human ship, he remembered being called Tarn by a tiny creature who shared her grandmother's stories with him as if he were a friend. His old eyes burned. He did not understand it. But for the first time in over 1,000 years, he wanted to live. The peace lasted exactly 4 more hours. At 0413 ship time, the lantern's long-range scanner began to ping. Arya sat up in the dark, rubbing her eyes. She crawled to the cockpit and pulled up the screen. 3 ships, black, sharp-edged, no transponders, tracking her course. Her stomach turned to ice. Behind her in the cargo bay, Tarn's eyes snapped open. He knew those ships. The Seekers had found him again. There is a moment just before a chase begins when both the hunter and the hunted know the truth at the same time. The big ship will catch the small one. The small one knows it too. But it runs anyway, because running is the only thing left. Arya felt that moment now, both hands gripping the controls of the lantern as the three black ships closed in behind her. She had pushed the thrusters past their safe limit 10 minutes ago. She steered straight into the wide asteroid field that floated between the Orion lanes, hoping the rocks would slow her hunters down. It worked. A little. The three black ships had to spread out, but they did not turn back. Tan limped slowly up from the cargo bay. He stopped at the corridor behind her seat, lowered his huge head into the doorway, and watched the screen over her shoulder. You know them, don't you? Arya said quietly. Are they worse than pirates? He did not need to answer. His silence was the answer. Arya pulled the lantern around a jagged asteroid and saw a small dot of light far ahead. A mining outpost. Old, half abandoned, but it had air walls and maybe people. Hold on, Tarn, she said. We are going to land. The lantern crashed more than it landed. She brought it down hard on the outpost's old docking platform, sparks flying. The three black ships circled above and then began their own slow descent, calm and patient. Arya popped the cargo door open and helped Tarn limp out. The black ships landed in a perfect triangle around the platform, and a hooded figure stepped out of the middle one. He was tall and thin, his face too smooth, too still, like a mask that had grown into a person. My name is Velric, he said. His voice was soft and friendly, which somehow made it worse. And you human are holding something that does not belong to you. I bought him, Arya said. Her voice shook, but she stood in front of Tarn. Legally, he is mine. You bought a piece of meat, Velric said gently. I have come for the relic inside. He is not a relic. He is mine. Velric sighed like a teacher disappointed in a child. He raised one hand. Two of his men stepped forward and grabbed Arya by the arms. They dragged her away from Tarn and threw her down on her knees in the open dust. One of them pressed a long curved blade against the back of her neck. It is a kindness, really, Velric said, walking slowly toward her. We have hunted that creature for 1,047 years. You have done a brave thing by feeding him his last warm meal. Now please, hold still. Arya closed her eyes. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of Earth. She thought of Tarn's wing over her in the dark. And in the cargo door of the lantern, the old dragon heard her last shaking breath. Something inside him broke. It was not anger. Anger had been beaten out of him a long time ago. It was the simple feeling of a king who had let one too many of his people be hurt while he was too tired to stand up. His clouded eyes flared. Slowly, painfully, Tarn rose to his full height. His broken wing trembled, but it spread. His good wing spread too. A faint golden light began to glow under his cracked scales, like a fire trying to wake up after a long sleep. He opened his mouth, and he roared. It was not a roar like a beast. It was a roar like a mountain, remembering it had once been a volcano. It rolled across the platform, across the outpost, across the asteroid field. The lantern shook. The black ship's lights flickered. Every seeker on the ground froze in place. Two of them dropped to their knees. They were the older ones. Their hoods slid back, and their faces went pale. They whispered words in a language Arya did not know, but she heard one word clearly again and again. The crown, the crown, the crown. Velric stumbled back a single step. Just one. But that one step said everything. Tarn limped forward, slow and heavy, until he was standing right beside Arya. He lowered his enormous head down to her shoulder, carefully, gently. He pressed his snout against her neck, the same place where the curved blade had been a moment ago. It was an old gesture. The Seekers all knew it. Every dragon in the galaxy knew it. Fealty. The oldest king of all dragons had just bowed his head to a small human woman in front of his enemies. Velric's smile was gone. Fall back, he whispered to his men. Fall back. Now. The Seekers obeyed. They lifted off in silence. But before his ship rose, Velric looked one last time at Arya. You have no idea what you have just awakened, human, he said softly. The old kingdoms will come for him. And for you? Then he was gone. Arya stayed on her knees. Tan stayed with his head on her shoulder. Neither of them moved for a long time. The dust settled around them like soft gray snow. Finally, Arya reached up. She wrapped both her small arms around the side of his huge face, pressed her forehead against his warm scales, and started to cry. Tarn closed his eyes. And for the first time in over 1,000 years, the king was home. Velmara had two sons, one small and white, one big and orange. When they both set at the same time, the whole sky went the color of warm honey, and the trees on the sanctuary moon glowed as if someone had lit them from the inside. It was the first sky Tarn had seen in over 1,000 years that did not have iron bars in front of it. Arya had brought the lantern down in a quiet valley 3 days after the chase. There was a small river, soft wide grass fields, and a few abandoned shipping crates from old settlers half buried in moss. She got to walk the next morning. She dragged the crates into a wide half circle near the river, sliced doors and windows into them with a plasma cutter, and stretched a thick tarp over the top for a roof. By the end of the week, she had a small, warm shelter big enough for her and a wide open shaded area big enough for Tarn. He watched her work the whole time. He never offered to help. His broken wing still dragged. His left back leg still gave out under him every few steps. But his eyes followed her everywhere, and every time she stopped to drink water, he would let out a soft rumble, like a quiet thank you. In the evenings, she sat by his side and read to him. She had brought a small reader tablet from her ship full of old human files her grandmother had loaded for her years ago. Poems, letters from soldiers, songs from farmers. Arya read them all out loud, slowly, with the soft voice of a person who had no idea anyone was really listening. Tan was listening. He understood every word. He had learned the human tongue centuries ago in a slave pen on a frozen moon from a kind worker who had given him part of his own meal. He had never let any owner know that he understood. It was the only secret he had left. But Arya was not an owner. So one night he let her know. She had just finished reading a poem about a mother waiting for her son to come home from a war. Her voice was getting tired. She leaned her head back against his warm side and said quietly, I wonder if anyone ever read to you when you were small. There was a long pause. Then a low, rumbling voice said, No, little one. Arya froze. She did not turn around. She did not scream. She just sat very still. You can talk, she whispered. Yes, Tarn said. His voice was soft and old, like wind moving over stone. I am sorry I did not tell you. Every owner I have ever had, I hid my voice from. It was the last thing of mine they did not take. Arya reached up and put her small hand on his snout. You do not have to hide anything from me, Tarn, she said. Not ever. He closed his eyes. That was the night that old Mira arrived. She came walking up the valley path at first light, leaning on a long wooden cane. She was a small, wrinkled woman with pale blue skin and white hair tied in a long braid. She carried a heavy bag of books on her back. She was a traveling archivist, she said, and she had walked many days to see if the rumors of a human living with a dragon in this valley were true. When she crested the last hill and saw Tarn lying in the morning sun, her cane fell out of her hand. Her knees hit the grass. Oh, she whispered. Oh, by every star. It is you. It is really you. Mira told the whole story that night sitting by the fire while Arya listened with a cup of cold chai forgotten in her hands. The dragon she had bought was Tarnathos the Eternal, the last living monarch of the Draconic Concord, a ruler so old that even his enemies had forgotten the year of his birth. He had ended 7 great wars without firing a shot. He had once carried a wounded child across an entire ocean on his back because no medic could be found in time. And then his own council had poisoned him. They had stripped his crown and sold him into slavery in secret, because killing a king openly would have started a civil war. For 1,047 years he had been passed from owner to owner, beaten, starved, sold for scrap prices. Each new master had broken a little more of him until he had forgotten his own name. Arya stared at Tarn. He had turned his huge face away. He could not look at her. She set down her cup. She walked across the grass. She climbed onto the small ridge of his shoulder and pressed her cheek against the side of his great head. Tarn, she whispered. Look at me. He slowly did. Crown or no crown, she said, her voice shaking but steady. You are still my Tarn. You are still the friend who put his wing over me in the dark. That has not changed. That will never change. The old dragon began to weep, real tears, slow and heavy. They rolled down his cracked scales and disappeared into the grass. Arya held him. Mira, sitting by the fire, lowered her head and said quietly, Child, you should know one more thing. The traitor houses have heard the rumors too. They thought he was finally dead. Now they know he is not. She looked at them both with tired, kind, frightened eyes. They are coming, and they will not come to kneel. News in the galaxy traveled in strange ways, not on official channels, not on government feeds. The real news, the kind that mattered, traveled through tired pilots in dusty bars, through old freighter captains, through grandmothers whispering at market stalls in languages no one wrote down. That was the kind of news that started moving the morning after Mira arrived. It started in a small spaceport on a moon called Drathos. An old freighter pilot sat down at a counter, ordered a hot drink, and said quietly to the bartender, "Somebody saw the Eternal King last night." Two of the old seekers fell to their knees in front of him. They called the crown by name. "The story's real this time." The bartender stopped wiping the counter. By the next sunrise, that story had jumped to 6 other moons. By the end of the week, it had crossed 3 star systems. And it was changing as it traveled. It was not just that the Eternal King was alive, it was that he had bowed his great head to a small human woman in the dust of an outpost. He had chosen her. For some species, that was the most shocking part. A king who had ruled 12 galaxies had picked a fragile creature from the youngest civilization in the galaxy as his sovereign. It made some old enemies furious. It made other old friends cry. Within 3 weeks, ships began appearing in the skies over Velmara. They came one at a time at first. A small scout ship from an exiled scholar species, a patched up trader carrying an old dragonkin who had been hiding in a swamp for 400 years, a medical shuttle from a species the Concord had once saved from a plague. They landed quietly, walked up to where Tarn lay in the sun, knelt for a moment, and then asked Arya if they could help. Arya did not know how to be a queen. She had no interest in being one, but she did know how to organize people, so she put them to work. She had them clear a landing field, dig out the old defense turrets the first settlers had abandoned in the hills, and set up a medical tent for Tarn, who still could not stand for long. But she knew it was not enough. A handful of old scholars and medics could not stop a fleet. So she did something no exiled monarch in the long history of the Concord had ever done. She picked up a small communicator, climbed onto a rock at the top of the valley, and broadcast a message on the open human channels. "This is Arya. I am a human from Earth. Most of you do not know me. I bought an old dragon at an auction to save him from being cut up for parts. I did not know who he was. Now I do. And the people who broke him 1,000 years ago are coming to finish what they started. I am not asking the galaxy for help. I am asking my own people. You know how we are. We do not walk past someone who is hurting. I am one human standing in front of one dragon, and I will not move. If you can come, come. But please do not let me stand here alone." She turned the communicator off. She did not expect much. Humans were the loudest species in the galaxy. They were also the most stubborn. By the end of the first day, 3 small human cargo ships had already changed course toward Velmara. By the end of the second day, it was 19 ships. By the end of the week, it was over 100. They were not warships. They were freighters, mining haulers, medical shuttles, private little family ships with names painted on the side in crooked letters. They were flown by pilots, mechanics, retired soldiers, students, doctors, farmers, and one very angry grandmother who said her late husband had served on a Concorde ship as a young man and she was going to honor him properly. They came because one of their own had asked. Tarn watched them land one by one from the highest cliff in the valley. He could not speak for a long time. He simply watched the small ragged ships line up in defensive rings around the moon. He watched the humans climb out and immediately start helping each other, arguing, laughing, pulling tools out of bags, setting up med stations, sharing food. He had ruled 12 galaxies in his long life. He had been obeyed, feared, and worshipped. But no one had ever come for him because they were asked nicely. No one had ever come because a friend stood up first. He turned his great head to Arya, who was standing beside him on the cliff. "Your people are mad," he said softly. "Yes," she said. She was smiling through tears. "We really are." That night, the long-range scanners began to ping again. Not 3 ships this time. Not even 30. A fleet. Mira walked up the cliff path slowly, her face pale. "They have arrived," she said. "The traitor houses. All of them. Lord Vorn leads them." Tarn closed his eyes. The name hurt more than any wound on his old body. Vorn had been his oldest friend, his most trusted advisor, the one who had smiled across the long table and lifted his goblet 1,000 years ago, the one who had hidden the poison. He has waited a long time to see if I would die quietly, Tarn said. He opened his eyes again. The clouds in them seemed thinner now. There was a faint golden light underneath. I will not die quietly. Above them, the dark sky began to fill with the slow, terrible shapes of warships. The storm had come. Lord Vorn's dreadnought blocked out one of Velmara's two sons. It hung in the sky above the valley like a black knife pressed against the throat of the moon, and behind it floated 47 more warships in perfect formation. The traitor houses had not come to negotiate. They had come to erase a name from history, a cold voice broadcast on every open channel. This is Lord Vorn of the High Concord houses. You are harboring a war criminal. Surrender the creature within 1 hour, or this moon will be reduced to ash. The reply came back almost immediately. It was Arya's voice, calm, tired. This is Arya of Earth. No. The first shots fell from the sky 6 minutes later. The traitor fleet had expected an easy slaughter. An old half-dead dragon, a foolish human girl, a handful of broken outcasts in a forgotten valley. What they got was something nobody in the galaxy had a name for yet. The human pilots moved first. Their tiny ships were faster than anything the Concorde had built in centuries, and they had no formal training, no proper formation, no military discipline at all. They simply flew. They wove between the giant warships like insects between stone pillars, dodging, twisting, firing in patterns no Concorde general had ever seen. The traitor ships could not lock onto them. They moved too strangely. Down in the valley, Arya stood at the broadcast tower with a headset pressed to her ear, calling out coordinates, calling out injuries, calling out hope. She was not a soldier. She was a xenobiologist with dirt on her face and a torn jacket, but she knew every name of every pilot above her, and she said each name like a prayer. In the deep valleys around them, the old dragonkin who had come out of hiding now rose into the air for the first time in centuries. They were old, they were slow, but they remembered how to fight. The sky filled with fire, wings, and steel. Tan watched from the highest cliff. His good wing twitched. His broken wing trembled. He had not flown in over 1,000 years. He was not sure his body remembered how. But Vorn's dreadnought had begun moving down through the clouds, hunting, and Tan knew exactly who it was hunting. He looked at Arya far below, her small figure waving instructions at a pilot. She looked up at him at the same moment. Their eyes met across the smoke. She did not say anything. She did not have to. Tarn turned to face the wind. Then he jumped off the cliff. For one long, terrible moment, he fell. His broken wing flapped uselessly. His old body twisted in the air. Arya screamed his name, and then the wing locked open. Maybe it was old muscle memory. Maybe it was the faint golden glow that was now spreading under his cracked scales like a river coming back to life. Whatever it was, Tarn caught the wind, leveled off, and rose. He was not as fast as he once had been. He was not as strong. But he was the eternal king in the sky again. He met Vorn above the burning clouds. The two old dragons tore at each other in a way that had no grace, no beauty, only history. Vorn was bigger, stronger, healthier. He had spent centuries plotting this exact moment. He fought with cold precision. Tarn was wounded. His old body could not keep up. Vorn slammed him against a piece of falling debris and pinned him there. He raised one massive claw for the killing blow. He leaned close to Tarn's ear and whispered in the old Concord tongue, I should have crushed you the first time, old friend. Tarn looked up at him. His eyes were not clouded anymore. They were burning gold. You should have, he said softly. Now listen carefully. And then, in a voice that was no longer the voice of a beaten slave, but the voice of a king who had finally remembered every word of every oath ever sworn to him, Tarn spoke an ancient command. It was the old crown command, the one only the true monarch could give. It traveled through every loyalty oath the traitor houses had ever sworn, all the way back through 1,000 years of careful lies, and it broke every single one of them. Above them, every warship of the traitor fleet shuddered. The captains heard the crown command in their own minds. They had sworn their oaths to Vorn, but underneath those oaths, deeper than they had ever admitted, was an older oath, an oath to the eternal king. The crown chose. One by one, the warships turned. Their guns swung away from the valley and pointed at Vorn's dreadnought. Vorn went pale. He let go of Tarn. He turned in the air, looking at his own fleet, and his great mouth opened in something that might have been a scream or might have been a prayer. His own ships opened fire. The dreadnought broke apart in the high clouds, and Lord Vorn fell out of the sky for the last time. The battle ended in silence. Just smoke and tired wings and the slow drift of falling ash. Tarn dropped out of the sky. He did not land. He crashed. He hit the cliffside hard, scales cracking, golden light flickering and dying along his body. Arya was already running. She was sprinting up the cliff path before the dust had even settled. She reached him and fell to her knees beside his huge head. He was breathing. Slow, shallow, but breathing. His old eyes opened. They were clear now. They were the deep, warm gold of a sun setting over a quiet sea. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, in his soft, rumbling voice, he spoke. I ruled 12 galaxies, little one, he whispered. But I have never been loved until you. Arya pressed her forehead against his and wept into his warm scales. Behind her, on the cliff and in the valley and in the sky above, every surviving creature of the old Concord lowered their heads. They did not bow to Thanatos. They bowed to the small human woman who had bought a king to save him. Years later, in a peaceful garden in that same valley on Velmara, a small wooden sign sat among the flowers. Arya had carved it herself the night Tarn finally laid his great head down for the last quiet sleep of an old life well lived. The sign read, Here rests Tarn, who endured, and the human who reminded him he was loved. Above the sign, carved into the stone wall of the cliff, was the new mark of the reborn Concord. It was a dragon's wing curled gently around a small human hand. The end.